Dillon Danis plans on moving to the UFC. Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria is being targeted for January on a pay-per-view card. And also, Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev has been made official for that same January pay-per-view card. What's going on with Brian Ortega? I might make a whole separate video about that tomorrow. I guess we'll find out pretty soon, I hope. Or will we? What's going on with Brian Ortega? Either way, we start with the news that Dillon Danis mentioned that he was very interested in going to the UFC if he were to get a win over Logan Paul. Now, that is a big ask because I do think that Logan Paul's going to beat him. But if he does win, he says he has no interest in going back to Bellator. He also said that Bellator's being bought by PFL, which is interesting to hear from him as well because he is a guy who keeps in talks with people that are at Bellator. He has a contract at Bellator and said that he might just get cut or maybe just ask for a release or pay off the rest of his contract with his win money against Logan Paul. And as much as people don't like Dillon Danis and don't think he's all that as a martial artist, you can't deny having him as an up-and-coming welterweight prospect in the UFC would be really interesting to see. Now, he took to Twitter to say, if I go to the UFC, give me an easy first fight, I'll take Kevin Holland. And as much as I don't think that should be the thing that happens, if he does beat Logan Paul and becomes one of the biggest names in combat sports, because let's be real, if he finishes Logan Paul by TKO, he's going to be an absolute superstar, and that's going to go so beyond viral. It's like, you can't even imagine how viral he's going to be. And then he goes into like 2024 and the UFC's like, you know what? We don't mind you making maybe a contender series show out of Dillon Danis. Maybe it'll be for a pay cut, but he knows that there's going to be big fights on the line if he does win. Maybe they do just say, you know what, Dillon Danis? I know you're only 2-0 in MMA, but with the exception of the fact that you are a massive superstar, I wouldn't mind him just getting given a Kevin Holland fight in his debut. He's a massive name. It'd be a massive matchup. And as much as people are going to be like, well, he hasn't earned it, who you to say that he's earned that? He hasn't earned a shot in the UFC. This is absolute silliness. The fact that he's mentioned that this is his idea to go on to try and achieve something in the UFC, which is most MMA fighters' dreams anyway. The fact that he mentioned that, and he said he has no interest in fighting in PFL, no interest in fighting in Bellator. UFC is his MMA home if he does want to commit to that as a career. And I'd love to see it. Like, even if he was going to go in there and lose and be a massive underdog against a Kevin Holland, let's put Kevin Holland in that position. Let's put someone else in that position who's in the welterweight division. Some other name that's somewhat okay and highly ranked. There's like a decent matchup for him outside the rankings in the welterweight division. Kevin Holland might be that guy, to be honest with you. He might be the only guy you can do it with. But again, Neil Magny is also an option. The basically worse version of Kevin Holland with no finishing potential, essentially. So all of these things make sense, in my opinion. At welterweight, just giving him a massive matchup in his debut. Maybe he has to go through the contender series first and they make an exception and pay him quite a heap of money on the contender series against a 4-0 MMA prospect in the welterweight division, and then maybe he gets signed to the UFC on like a one-fight deal, sink or swim against Kevin Holland. You win, you continue. You lose, you're out of the company. Maybe that's how it will end up going, but I think this is an interesting narrative to go on, and I'd love to see Dillon Danis try out the UFC if he does beat Logan Paul now. If he loses to Logan Paul, which I'm expecting to happen, by the way, then there's no interest in him coming to the UFC. In all honesty, there's no interest. Like, he'll have lost to Logan Paul. He'll be an embarrassment. He won't have any name value after that. He'll just be seen as the guy that, well, it was fun on Twitter for a bit, but he lost to Logan Paul. Oh, well, you know what I mean? But if he does go out there after all of the things that he's been saying about Logan Paul and this whole court case situation as well, and finish Logan Paul by TKO, and have a great moment on the microphone afterwards, and actually call out a Jake Paul, and then maybe chuck in a side call out of, just give me Kevin Holland right now in the UFC, or give me some other decently named welterweight in the UFC right now, I'll take him on. Give me Bo Nickel right now. You know what I mean? Like, something like that. You never know. I'd be somewhat interested by it. So I'd like to see it happen. Maybe it does happen in the future. I hope he's not just waffling for the sake of it, because I've been watching a few Dillon Danis interviews recently, and he does seem, behind the trolling on the Twitter and stuff, like he is genuinely interested in trying to create some kind of legacy in combat sports for himself. And it starts with that Logan Paul fight. But we're going to move on to other stories that have come up. We're not going to spend too much time on this. Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria is a matchup that's being targeted for January on the pay-per-view card. I believe it. Alexander Volkanovski has mentioned before that he is interested in that January date. That's when he wants to come back. Also, Arnold Allen, Movsar Evloev has been added to that same card. I have a feeling that maybe Ilia Topuria can beat Alexander Volkanovski. And it's not entirely to do with the cover curse, dude. He's going to lose. That's how it works on the UFC cover. He's going to lose that matchup, guys. Don't get too excited here. As much as there is a worry in my brain to say, man, you want to pick Volkanovski. It makes sense to pick Volkanovski. There is that feeling that maybe Ilia Topuria could be that guy with the power in his hands and the crisp boxing on the inside that he has. If anyone's going to KO Alexander Volkanovski at featherweight, I thought it would be maybe potentially Josh Emmett. With a punch I'm talking about. Yair could have maybe done it with a head kick, you never know. But with a punch on the inside, with a higher chance of landing in a fight. If anyone's going to do it, it would have been Josh Emmett, in my opinion. And now Ilia Topuria kind of proved that he's the new short, stocky powerhouse of the division. I think those guys are the guys that are going to give Volkanovski problems. I'm not going to pick Ilia Topuria because his style is a little bit tailor-made for Volk. I don't want to go as far to insult his style, but from what we've seen from Ilia Topuria, maybe he would change this for the Volkanovski fight, but maybe that'd make him a bit worse because he hasn't been fighting that way recently. He turns over his lead leg quite a bit, has a bit of a Philly shell going on, rolls with shots. The way his lead leg is positioned, it's kind of like Wonderboy, but not as crazy with the footwork. He kind of plods in a little bit and takes those little shuffle steps into range rather than Wonderboy, who's bouncing on his toes in and out. The way his lead leg is positioned in nearly all of his fights is screaming to be leg kicked over and over again. And Volkanovski has some of the quickest, best leg kicks in the game. Definitely maybe some of the best leg kicks in the featherweight division. He lands them on everyone at will. And as much as I like Ilia Topuria, and maybe he could land a good combo, he does have quite short arms. I don't know what the reach of Ilia Topuria is. I'm actually going to try and check that right now. But at the same time, I feel like Volk's going to be too much for him. What's the reach of Ilia Topuria? 69 inches of reach. Nothing too bad, but Volk's going to have that multiple inch reach advantage over him. Going to be landing those shots on the outside, not committing with too much on the inside either. And then just like tapping at Ilia Topuria's legs on the outside. And I think if he keeps tapping at those legs, it's going to take away some of that power from Topuria and some of that willingness to like dip back and look for counters if his lead leg's getting chopped up. And I think that's where we could see Ilia maybe starting to shoot for a takedown, fail a takedown or two, get hit to the body. Volkanovski separates. I am going to have to side with Alexander Volkanovski. I don't think Ilia's proven enough yet. Josh Emmett, I think, is extremely overrated in hindsight in the featherweight division, but because he just does the same thing over and over again. And even he was able to make it the distance with Ilia Topuria. He took a beating in that fight, but he did make it the distance. I don't see anyone beating Volkanovski at featherweight across the distance. Maybe Ilia could catch him on the chin and put him away, but Emmett is very basic in what he does. Overhand, step through, overhand. Other overhand, step through, overhand. It seems to be the only thing he really does outside of a jab now and again. And Volk is just too versatile, too dynamic, too unorthodox in what he does. And when I say unorthodox, I don't mean he does things weird. I just mean he has a varied amount of attacks that he goes for. He has different attacks on each side, and I think it might overload Ilia Topuria a little bit whilst his leg's getting chewed up, which is not going to be good for him. So I am going to go Volkanovski, but I can see an idea of Ilia Topuria potentially being the guy to do it. Plus EA UFC cover curse is in full effect for that fight. We move on to another fight that has been officially added to that card. Of course, the Volkanovski-Topuria fight has been only rumored for that card and is being targeted. But the official fight that has been signed for that card is Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev. I understand why they've done this. Arnold Allen is probably going to train at TriStar for this camp. He does a lot of training over in Canada. I'm sure it'll be easy for him to go from TriStar to a Canada event. I don't know where in Canada this is happening. I'm going to check. It's on Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Okay. Scotiabank Arena. We've been there before for Canada, but I feel like Arnold Allen can win this fight. It's a risky one to take in a 3-rounder, but I don't mind a 3-rounder here, knowing that it's going to be a wrestling fight, because we have seen Arnold Allen slow down if people do try and wrestle him now and again. Now, he always seems to find a way back into a fight when that does happen, because, I mean, outside of Holloway, he was undefeated in the featherweight division for a very long time. Let's not forget about that. And he fought a very varied level of opponents and with different styles. So he took on a whole bunch of different guys to get to the top. He's got a very well-rounded style to deal with a bunch of different extreme styles. I'm going to have to go with Arnold Allen over Movsar Evloev. Evloev is good. He's very good. Extremely good. But every now and then he has a performance where I'm like, man, he didn't look all that good in that one. And in his last fight, I know Diego Lopez is really, really good and dangerous, but he took that fight on very short notice. And Movsar Evloev was really struggling in that fight to get off damage, to look that good on the feet. And I think Arnold Allen might have the takedown defense necessary to keep Evloev off of him and to stop Evloev from ragdolling him in the fight. Also, he's got nasty guillotines as well and chokes that he goes for. But he's also got really nasty shots on the counter, and he moves around on the outside. And sometimes when Evloev throws that 1-2, he's open to be caught by someone on the back foot with a counter hook. That's what Lopez caught him with. That's what he's been caught with before in his career as well. Dawodu had him in a little bit of trouble in the 3rd round. And he's had those fights early in his career. If we go to the stats of Movsar Evloev, I know he's improved. But at the same time, he's had those fights earlier in his career where things just didn't seem to work out for him. You know what I mean? Where there was a certain style matchup that he just didn't look great against. You know, we go through his career. Beat Sung Woo Choi. Out-grappled him in that fight. Didn't look great, though. It wasn't the best performance. The Enrique Barzola fight, he nearly lost. He nearly lost that fight. 4-11 on takedowns. Was outstruck on numbers in the 1st and 2nd round of that fight, but he kept ending the round with a takedown that he would do a little bit of total striking from. But overall, Barzola landed more significant strikes and more total strikes as well in that fight, and got his own takedown. So it's like there's certain fights, like even the Mike Grundy fight where he won by decision, he ended up losing a round of that fight because he got caught in a guillotine. And then the Nick Lentz fight was a split decision, terrible split decision, but Lentz probably won that 1st round. You know what I mean? Like, there's been these fights against these well-rounded opponents, and Allen has had them as well. But I just feel like maybe Arnold Allen is one of those well-rounded opponents that's going to be able to give Evloev a little bit of problems. If he can stuff those takedowns, which I think he might be able to at this point. We don't see Arnold Allen getting ragdolled too often. You know what I mean? People don't seem to be successful trying to grapple with him. And I feel like his stand-up might be a bit too tricky for Evloev. And after that Holloway competitive fight, we may see a massive improvement in Arnold Allen's game because he now knows he's so close to the top. Look at what Holloway's been doing to TKZ, Calvin Kattar, these other fighters. Arnold Allen knows that he's right up there with that Yair Rodriguez level featherweight, which is basically like just outside Volkan Holloway's area of the featherweight division. So I think Arnold Allen might get the rub, might go on to improve massively. And I'm looking forward to seeing him fight early next year. I think it's a good matchup for him. And I think Evloev did not look the best in his last one. So that'll be really interesting to see. One thing I do want to say, what is Brian Ortega doing? And why is he still ranked number 3 in the world at featherweight? I might make a whole video about this tomorrow, so I'm not going to go too hard on it. But at the end of the day, he's number 3 in the rankings. What has he done? He beat TKZ years ago, now retired. Other than that, what has Brian Ortega really done? And people are going to say, well, what about Colby Covington? Covington at least had extremely competitive fights with the top of his division. And that does matter in the rankings. Because I'll have you guys remember, Dominic Reyes was like ranked number 4 or 5 when he fought John Jones. After the John Jones decision, which was really close and should have gone to Reyes, but they gave it to John Jones. Because of how competitive that fight was, Reyes moved from number 4 in the rankings to number 1 in the rankings in the light heavyweight division. That's the truth. And then he was put into that title fight with Jan Blachowicz afterwards that didn't go his way. But he was moved up the rankings for competitiveness with the champion that was so dominant in John Jones. Usman was the same way, and that's why Covington stays at the top. Other than guillotining and nearly triangling Volkanovski, he got schooled in that fight. He had one round, and he didn't even win that round, by the way. He should have been finished at the end of that round. The referee somehow, some way, let him continue that fight. Craziest decision I've seen in a title fight in a long time. He didn't really have a competitive fight outside of that moment. He landed one good punch in round 5. Volk was pretty much tuning him up for the rest of it. Won round 3 dominantly at the end of it. Basically TKO'd him. I never understood why Ortega's so highly ranked. He hasn't beaten anyone, and he got dominated by Holloway and Volk. Lost to Yair Rodriguez. What else has he done? At least Covington's not got some loss to another top contender that's holding him down. He's only lost to Usman. You know what I mean? So it's like, I mean, now Usman's a contender, but, you know, at the time to keep him ranked, like, Ortega's lost 2 ranked opponents that haven't been champion. Interim champ for Yair, whatever. It's just silly to me that he's still ranked number 3. And now what are they going to do with him? Do him versus Yair too? Like, it's just like, seems like there's some weirdness type of favoritism with Brian Ortega. And I don't understand it. The dude doesn't fight. Okay, he doesn't fight. He doesn't show that he has the ability outside of that one guillotine attempt on Volk and the triangle. Outside of those few moments, he's been shown consistently, basically, that he's not ready for the top level of the sport. Why are they, like, it should have been Ortega Allen and then Evloev fights Yair Rodriguez or something along those lines. Like, or Evloev just fights Max Holloway. Like, that's what this should have been. But somehow Ortega's now going to get an Emmett matchup who's aging and coming off losses. Maybe he'll get to fight number 2 in the world, Yair Rodriguez. Ortega's in a position right now, in my opinion, where he should have to fight the next up-and-comer, and they're not having him do it. I don't understand that at all. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. See you later. Goodbye. Yeah, annoying about Brian Ortega, but it is what it is. See you later, guys. Toodle Pip.